The Ugly Duckling. Once upon a time, not so very long ago, during the last days of spring, a mother duck was sitting on her nest among the reeds by the meadow pond. In the distance, the manor house sat at the edge of the woods that had just become fully green. The fields of corn were just about to tassel, and some patches of flowers were still uneaten in the pastures. One could already hear the voices of summer, a woodpecker hammering for bark bugs, a squirrel chattering at who knows what, and a distant crow just sounding off. The insects, especially the grasshoppers, seemed to be competing for attention. It was the best time of the year in the country. The mother duck was sitting patiently when suddenly, on this particular day, the eggs began to crack. "Cheep, cheep," said the little ducklings, as each one poked its head out of the jagged hole in the shell. "Wank, wank," their mother greeted them. "What a big world this is," said the baby ducks. Now they had much more room than when they were inside their eggshells. "This is not the whole world," the mother duck told her new babies, who really couldn't see much past the nest right now. "It goes far past the garden, and the fields, and the woods. I have flown over some of it, but I have never been as far as it goes." The baby ducks were just learning to use their legs when their mother noticed that one egg had not hatched yet. It was bigger and of a slightly different color than the rest. "Oh dear," she said, as she settled herself back on the nest to keep the last egg warm. An inquisitive neighbor duck, who was somewhat older, came to pay the new mother a visit, and asked, "How are you doing?" "This one last egg is taking such a long time," answered Mother Duck. "But look at the other babies. They are the finest ducklings I have ever seen." All new mothers think exactly this way about their babies. They do take after their father, the rascal. He flies around a lot, but seldom comes to visit. But he is quite handsome in his blue and green feathers and all. "Let me see that egg that hasn't cracked yet," said the neighbor duck. "Yes, I think that might be a turkey's egg. I was tricked like this once, and I had no end of trouble and worry." Turkeys are afraid of the water, and no matter how much I quacked and snapped, it did not want to learn to swim. "What happened to the turkey?" asked Mother Duck. "And how were you tricked?" "I really don't know how the strange egg came to be there. Perhaps a badger got tired of trying to break it open and left it in my new nest with my other eggs. They do that sometimes, I've been told. Who knows how these things happen?" "I suspected one of my other eggs was missing, but I lost count. You know, ducks can only count one, two, many. That's about it," the neighbor duck continued. But finally the turkey wandered off, and the farmer's wife took it to live in the chicken yard. Said the neighbor duck as she looked even more closely at the egg. "Yes, that is likely a turkey egg," she said confidently. "Just leave it, and go teach the other children how to swim." But Mother Duck had a kind, maternal heart. She lifted her head and replied softly, so as to avoid an argument. "I'll sit on it a little longer. It might be just an unusual duck egg, you know." "Suit yourself," sniffed the old duck, and waddled away. Finally, the next day, the egg began to crack. "Cheep, cheep!" cried the little one, poking his head through the shell. "Whack, whack!" his mother encouraged him. But when he finally tumbled out, she was dismayed. Instead of being small and fluffy and lemon ivory colored, this duckling was large and scruffy and had a drab grayish color. How big and ugly he was, she thought. She smiled approvingly at him, not wanting to hurt her baby's feelings. But she really thought it might not be her baby. Could he be a turkey, as the old duck had suggested? There was one way to find out. Into the water he shall go, even if I have to push him in myself, Mother Duck decided. Splash! Into the water jumped Mother Duck. "Whackety-whack!" she called, and one duckling after another bravely took the plunge. The water came up over their heads, but they bobbed up again and found they could float quite naturally. Soon they were paddling around like little experts. Even the big ungainly one plopped into the water and began to swim as well as the others. "Well, that is no turkey," thought Mother Duck, quite amazed. Mother Duck's heart went out to the little oddball. See how well he swims, how erect he holds himself. He is, after all, my own chick, and he is not so bad-looking when you look at him properly. By this, she meant when you look at him with love. So she quacked encouragement to all her ducklings, then led them down to the farmyard. "Keep close to me now until you get to know the way of things," she admonished. She was about to say, "And stay in line," but they were already in line. "And beware of the cat." Mother Duck began teaching her children the ways of the world right away. "Now waddle in a line. Mind you, quack politely, and bend your necks to that old duck over there. She is the grandest of us all. She has Spanish ancestors, and that accounts for her size. Do you see that red tag around her leg? It means that she is very important. Quack now. Don't turn your toes in. Walk properly." There were lots of instructions. All the ducklings did as they were told. The other ducks inspected them as they walked by, as ducks are wont to do. Just look there, as if there were not enough of us in this farmyard already. Oh, my dear, how ugly that one duckling is. And one cruel duck even flew at him and bit him on the neck. Mother Duck bristled and faced down the mean duck. "Let him be," she said forcefully. "He is doing you no harm." The mean duck backed away quickly. The grand old Spanish duck decided to use her influence to settle the matter. "These are handsome ducklings," she quacked. "They are all perfect specimens, except this one. It is a pity he cannot be made over again, but that is not his fault." Mother Duck was very grateful for this support. It is always good to have a friend in a tough social situation. "It is true, Your Grace, that he is not handsome, but he seems a good boy. And he swims very gracefully, even better than the others. Perhaps time will improve his looks. After all, he was too long in the egg." She patted her ugly duckling on the neck and stroked his feathers with her bill. The important duck with the red tag, the grand old Spanish duck, looked around at all the other ducks meaningfully. "Welcome to the farmyard," she said pointedly to Mother Duck and her brood, and no one dared to dispute her. "Make yourselves at home, and if you find any uneaten fish heads, you can bring one to me." After this, the new family felt more at home, and as the days passed, they were accepted as a matter of fact. But the poor ugly duckling was sometimes bitten when no one, especially Mother Duck or the grand old Spanish duck, was looking. Both the ducks and the hens made fun of him, and the turkey cock, who was born with his spurs on, and therefore thought himself very special, would gobble and gobble at the ugly duckling until he was red in the face. He was the bully of the barnyard. The farmer could have put him straight, but he had other concerns. The poor duckling did not know which way to turn, and he was dejected because everyone thought him so ugly. He would have been very perturbed if he knew that they had named him the ugly duckling. But he did not complain to his mother or anyone else. He just tried to fit in. The days passed, and summer turned to autumn. Now the poor duckling was chased and harassed even by his own brothers and sisters. Finally, even his mother grew impatient with him, which really hurt his feelings. One day, he just ran away. He jumped and flapped right over the hedges, frightening the little birds who rose up into the air in a clamor. "It is because I am so ugly," he thought, not realizing that it was mostly because he had startled them. At sunset, he came to a great marshland where the wild ducks lived. He was so exhausted that he fell asleep in the reeds and stayed the whole night. In the morning, the wild ducks flew over to inspect their visitor. "What kind of bird are you?" they asked curiously. The ugly duckling turned around several times to greet all of them as well as he could. "My, but you are ugly," said one of the wild ducks rather rudely. "But that does not matter to us, so long as you are well behaved in our pond." Poor little fellow! All he had hoped for was permission to stay in their marsh and find something to eat among the rushes or under the water. He stayed there 2 whole days, and the wild ducks were not mean to him, but they were hardly friendly either. Then on the morning of the 3rd day, 2 young wild geese sailed into the pond. They were not long out of their shells, and were therefore rather pert. "Hey there," they said in unison. "You are so unique that we have taken quite a fancy to you. Would you like to join us and be a bird of passage? We are flying to another marsh, where there are some very charming wild geese who know how to say quack. You might appeal to them. Who knows?" Suddenly, bang, bang, he heard. A hunting party had invaded the marshes. The wild geese rose in terror and flew away as quickly as they could. The ugly duckling cowered among the reeds, because he was very afraid. The blue smoke from the guns rose like clouds among the trees and swept over the pond. The retrieving dogs splashed in the water, searching for ducks and geese, anything, dead or alive. The ugly duckling tucked his head under his wing when a big dog with flashing teeth slogged up right next to him, then plowed on without stopping. Who will ever know why? Maybe it was because the bird was so little and kept so still, or was so young it had no scent. But the little duckling thought, I am so ugly that even the dog doesn't want me. When the shooting had stopped, and the hunters and the dogs had finally gone, the ugly duckling dared to come out of the reeds. He hurried away as fast as he could waddle. He was afraid to fly, as he wasn't very good at it yet. He crossed fields and meadows until nightfall, when he came to a small cottage. An old woman lived there, with her cat and her hen. The cat, who was called Sunny, would arch his back, purr, and give off electric sparks when you stroked his fur the wrong way. The hen had tiny short legs, so she was called Chicken Low Legs. The old woman was as fond of these two animals as if they had been her own children. In the morning, the old woman discovered the ugly duckling huddled outside her doorway. What on earth is that? She wondered. Because the ugly duckling was so much bigger than the other little ducklings, she thought it was nearly grown. What a find! She exclaimed. Now I shall have duck's eggs as well as chicken eggs, if only it's not a drake. Well, we will just have to wait and see about that. Sunny purred, and Chicken Lowlegs clucked. Because if the duckling was a drake, meaning a boy, then obviously it could not lay eggs. Now the cat was actually the master of this house, and the chicken was its mistress. They were spoiled by the old woman, and quite conceited. They thought they were very special and always right about everything. The ugly duckling knew better than to say that there might be two opinions on this subject. Besides, he was reasonably safe and warm here, and he had nowhere else to go. He remembered the warning about cats, but the warning had been nonspecific. This cat seemed okay, but he was leery of Sunny anyway. After 3 weeks, no eggs had made their appearance. The cat decided to confront the problem head-on. "Can you lay eggs or not?" he asked. The ugly duckling shook his head. "I don't think so." Better keep quiet about it, warned Sonny. Have you heard about duck soup? As the days passed, the duckling thought more and more about the open spaces and sunshine of the marshes, and he longed to float on the water. He finally tried to talk to the hen about it. "What on earth possesses you?" she asked. Not being a swimmer herself, she thought of water only as something to avoid. "You have nothing to do. That is your problem." "Lay some eggs, or learn how to purr. Make yourself useful." "But it is so wonderful to float on the water and dive to the bottom for tender water plants. I love the way the water beads and rolls off my back." The duckling longed for the pond. "Humph! What kind of amusement is that?" asked the hen, critically. "I think you must be mad. Ask the cat about this. He is very wise. Ask him if he is fond of floating on water or diving under it. Or ask our mistress yourself, the old woman. What do you suppose she will say?" "You just don't understand me," sighed the ugly duckling. "Perhaps not," clucked the hen. "But who would? Are you not grateful for the good we have done you? You have lived in this warm cottage and in good society with us. Believe me, I think you mean well. But I tell you home truths, and there is no surer way than that of knowing who one's friends are." Chicken Lowlegs was really not mean, but she was opinionated, and her life was extremely narrow. "Take my advice," she finally said. "Just set about laying eggs, or learn to purr, or emit sparks. Anything." "I think I should go out into the wider world," the duckling said sadly. He was pretty sure he would never be able to lay eggs, and purring and sparking seemed beyond his reach as well. "Oh, then by all means do so." The hen was exasperated and done talking to him. So after thanking the cat and the old woman, as well as the hen, for their hospitality, the duckling went on his way. He figured the old woman did not really understand that he was trying to thank her. So he pulled out his first real tail feather and laid it at her feet. Maybe she would accept it as a thank you gift. As his mother had said, he was really a very good boy. He missed his mother so. The ugly duckling found a secluded pond in the woods where he decided to stay. It seemed to him that every living creature slighted him for his unattractiveness. He was very lonely, and wondered if he should have stayed at the cottage. Now the leaves in the woods were starting to turn yellow and red and brown. The wind became colder. Clouds came, looking dark and heavy, soon to drop cold rain, then snow. The wild ducks had already left, and the duckling did not know they had gone south to save themselves. He had no idea where to go, or what to do for himself. One morning, as the sun was rising, a flock of big, beautiful birds appeared out of the thickets of reeds. The duckling had never seen anything so wonderful. They were dazzlingly white, with long, waving necks, uttering peculiar cries as they spread their magnificent broad wings and flew away to warmer lands. The little duckling circled round and round in the water like a wheel, craning his neck after them. Then he cried a cry so piercing and so strange that he was frightened by his own voice. He wanted to follow them, but he had had no real training or practice in flying really high while living in the farmyard, or with the cat and the hen. Farmyard ducks do not fly south, or fly very much at all for that matter. He did not think he could fly very far, even though a deep instinct was telling him to go. The winter was long and bitterly cold. The duckling had to swim about in the water to keep it from freezing over. But every night the hole in which he swam got smaller and smaller. Finally, it froze him fast one dark night. He could move no more. Fortunately, early in the morning, a sympathetic farmer spotted him in the ice. He went out onto the frozen pond and hammered the ice around the terrified bird until he could extract him from his apparent tomb. Then he carried the half-dead duckling home, where his wife carefully revived him. But the duckling was so scared that he flapped all over the house, upsetting dishes and tipping over the milk jug. The woman chased him with a broom to shoo him out before he could do more damage. But all the flapping warmed him enough to be able to fly a little ways out into the bushes and the new-fallen snow. I could have stayed there in the warmth, but you do dumb things when you're scared, he thought after he calmed down somewhat. Somehow the duckling managed to survive the rest of the winter. He hung around the farmyard and ate scraps that the pigs and chickens had overlooked, or maybe didn't want. He sheltered in the lee of the barns and got some water from the icicles. He had no idea why he went on living day after day, but he did. Finally, spring arrived. The sun was higher in the sky and shone more warmly. The snow melted and the ponds thawed. The ugly duckling made his way back to the marsh, where he found more food among the rushes. The red-winged blackbirds were singing on the cattails, and small flowers were opening their buds. He stretched and raised his wings, and was surprised to find them much larger than he remembered, and stronger too. He flapped them tentatively, and then rose into the air with a whoosh, and hardly any effort. No more frantically beating the air just to barely stay aloft. He was a little unsteady, but he soon figured out to steer himself. And he banked and sailed across the woods, where he saw a large formal garden spread below him. The lilacs were in full blossom, perfuming the air. Apple trees overhung the banks of the garden's small pond, spreading their white petals on the surface. And there in the distance were 3 huge white birds gliding over the woods with rustling feathers. The ugly duckling observed these majestic birds, but was seized by utter melancholy. "Perhaps they will hack me to pieces because I am so ugly if I dare to approach them," he thought. But what does it matter? It is better to die now than to be snapped at by ducks, pecked by hens, jeered at by who knows who, spurned by the housewife, or to suffer the misery of another winter. His life had been pretty unhappy so far. So he flew down to the water and swam slowly toward the stately swans, for that is what they were. When they saw him, they ruffled their feathers. "This is the end," the poor duckling thought. And he lowered his head toward the water to await his fate. But what was this he saw reflected in the mirror-like water? The ugly duckling looked around to see who might be next to him. But he was alone, and the swans were still a distance away. Could he be looking at himself? He was no longer a clumsy gray bird, ugly and ungainly. He was white as the snow that had just melted away. His neck was a long and graceful arc. His eyes were like dark onyx jewels set in his face. The 3 big swans swam around him, stroking him with their bills and murmuring, "Welcome to our garden, friend." He could scarcely believe it, but it seemed pretty clear now that he was himself a swan. It does not matter in the least if you were born in a duckyard, if you came from a swan's egg. Some little children came to the garden with corn and pieces of bread that they threw out onto the water. One of them cried out, "Oh, look! There is a new one!" The children clapped their hands and called for their mother and father to come and see. "The young one is so handsome. He is the prettiest one of all." And the old swans smiled to themselves and bowed their heads and did homage to him. He felt quite shy and hid his head under his wing. He remembered his misery and tribulation, and his good fortune seemed all the more wondrous because of it. He really did not know what to think. He was embarrassed to be flattered in this way. But he was, for the first time in his life, happy, very happy. But not at all proud, for a good heart never becomes proud. At last he could hide no longer under his wing. He lifted his head aloft on his slender neck and fanned out his wings over the water, sang with joy in his heart. "I never dreamed of such happiness when I was the ugly duckling." And he glided off with his new companions to a brand new life in the garden.